Okay, welcome to another Orbiter 2010 video. And this video is obviously a direct continuation of the last video where we are using IMFD to learn how to go to Mars. And once again, Dimitri is with me to help guide us all along on this journey. In the last video, we got our plan basically set up. We figured out the best time to launch so that we could leave Earth at a 90-degree heading, get into orbit. And now we have our actually we already did the ejection burn also, so now we're ready to warp time forward, get out toward Mars, and probably have to do a mid-course correction or two along the way. So Dimitri, what do we do at this point? How do we go forward?
Well, right now all we need to do is time warp, and once we are outside of Earth's sphere of influence, the orbit eject program will close by itself. So then we're going to use the course intercept program, which we have already set on the left.
Okay, so let's go ahead and warp time forward, and one of our indicators for how far out we are will be when that orbit eject program closes. That means we're far enough away from Earth that it's no longer the strongest source of gravity. Let's go out to 10,000, so it doesn't take forever to get out there. We can see the moon flying by. Now, do we want to go back to real time at this point?
Yeah, it's a good practice because you want to change the source right now of the target intercept program. You see that we had the Earth over here, and we want to change that to be the spacecraft that we are in.
That's right, because right now the interplanetary program is saying that if Earth were to move from that orbit to there,
Exactly.
So we want to press page, come over here to source, and can we press X to set ourselves as the source?
You can, yes, if you press X, it always selects the name of the vessel that you are in, or you can type even the name of your vessel, but X is faster.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've got this this program updated so that we now have the source. Our vessel is going to be targeting Mars and not Earth. So what do we want to do here?
Now, what we are looking at is the delta V that we're going to need for correction. Right now, we're still very close to Earth for this number to have any meaning. We're going to have to get quite a bit of distance from Earth in order to pay attention to whatever this value says. And we're going to use this delta V as our guide for the corrections for the arrival at Mars.
Okay, so right now it's telling us that if we wanted to do a mid-course correction, we would use all that delta V, but we know from experience that being this close to Earth, this number will, in all likelihood, work out in our favor. If we move time forward farther, it'll come down and we won't have this expensive of a burn.
Yeah, also it doesn't make very much sense because we just finished the orbit eject burn. We're supposed to have done a good job about it.
Yeah.
After all, IMFD did it all automatically. So this kind of delta V for a correction this far out doesn't really make much sense. And you will see how that number first goes lower, then it will go up again as you cross the boundary of being absolutely away from Earth, outside of Earth's influence, and then it will start dropping back again as we get closer to Mars.
Okay, so basically we're going to hit a low point here, and we might be tempted to do a mid-course correction, but Dimitri knows from experience.
It usually goes up again.
Yeah, we kind of have a wobble. So we'll ignore it that one time, and then it'll go up, and we might get concerned, but don't get concerned because it will come back down.
Well, unless you are a quarter of the way to Mars, and you can see now it's going up very high, and then it will start going down again. We want to go to 100,000 time acceleration until this reaches a minimum, and then it goes up again.
And I noticed that when it reached the high point, something on IMFD kind of flipped.
Yeah, it changes the... It's like it changes the orientation of the trajectory.
Okay, it's kind of like maybe like crossing the line of nodes or something like that.
Something like that. Not the line of nodes between the planets, but the line of nodes of the trajectory the spacecraft has right now, and the arrival. And you can also see that it happened almost opposite of the point
Yeah,
of the intercept.
yeah, I think that's actually exactly when it happened. So now we can see the DV is counting down very slowly, so we'll just continue warping time forward, and we're just looking for that absolute low point. I guess you can sort of maybe anticipate when that's going to happen when you start to see that those last couple decimal points really start to slow down. But for now, they're still counting down at a pretty good clip, so we'll go ahead and continue going forward. Now you can see it's kind of slowing down a little bit. But we'll continue moving forward. Down to about 31 meters a second on the Delta V. Not quite there. Yeah, now 31. And yeah, I'm really starting to get this, starting to sense how slow those numbers are counting down. So we need to be ready to back off time warp here. And I'm guessing right around 30 meters a second, maybe a little bit lower. Yeah, we've reached the bottom now. It's going back up, so immediately back to real time. And is it just a matter of doing AB, or do we want to do any tweaking?
You can do a little bit of tweaking because right now you need this delta V in order to arrive at Mars exactly on this date. But you can actually try and change the date a little bit to see how that helps with delta V.
Okay.
That's only to, you can, of course, you can do the correction right now and you will get to Mars on that date. But you can minimize the delta V that you need for correction by doing this.
Yeah, okay, so here with the arrival date, let's go to page to get access to these options, and then we'll go plus. That's actually making it worse, so let's go the other way. And we can see that's bringing the delta V down quite significantly. We're down to 11.10. Now, can we warp time forward a little bit to see if we can get more improvement?
Exactly. When you get a minimum, you time warp a little bit more in order to see if it drops or it goes higher. If it drops, you keep until you go to the next minimum point. If it doesn't, you make the burn right now.
Okay, so right now we're seeing that we've got 11.1, which is very reasonable, but we might, just the DV freak in us might be able to eke out a little bit more. So let's just do a little bit of time warp. And as we go forward at 1,000, we can actually see it's going up a little bit.
So this is the best time right now to make the corrections.
All right, so page over to these options and just AB. We don't even need to go to the BV, so AB.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really wanted to be obsessive about saving fuel, you could go to the BV, do a manual rotation on the vessel because the autopilot uses more fuel than it has to, but it's only like a meter a second or something. Okay. Do we want to do any translation for that last 0.016 or?
Well, it's not that important because you have to remember that right now IMFD is aiming for the dead center on Mars.
Oh, that's right.
And you can see from the trajectory that we are not that far away from the point of intercept of the Mars arrival. So you can leave it like that if you want, and we can go ahead and move to the next correction, which is going to be inside Mars Week's sphere of influence. That is when orbit MFD, when it is referenced to Mars, reaches G0.01.
All right, so let's bring up orbit MFD over on the right. Let's reference Mars. And when its gravitational influence indicates 0.01, then we know we are within the weak sphere of influence of Mars. And that's going to happen here in a little bit more. We're here. We got to go all the way out to there. So let's warp time forward.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, we're here.
At the same time, of course, we will keep a track of the delta V needed for the corrections. And if this goes up for some reason, let's say it goes to 10 meters per second, then we may want to stop before we reach this point and make another correction. But I don't think we will need to do that.
Yeah, so essentially, this is one of those whichever happens first situations. If the DV...
exactly. And this is this point that I talk about, the 0.01 arrival at Mars inside the weak sphere of influence, is simply an arbitrary point that I have chosen for myself, and in order to be consistent in my flights. It also happens that I have noticed that these are the points that you get the minimum delta V corrections needed, the minimum delta V for the corrections. But you could, if you wanted, to make a corrections when your orbit passes the orbit of Mars and you are still pretty close
Yeah,
to
well, it's
Mars.
really good to have.
Whatever.
It's really good to have points of reference that you can use every single time, so that you don't have to, so that you can have repeatable results from one flight to the
Yeah,
next.
if I'm going to use this method, these are the 2 points that I use. Of course, it's not that those are the necessary points, but I have found them to be useful. They are consistent, and you can repeat them over every flight. The first point is when the delta V reaches a minimum, and you do the adjustment with the MJD. And the second point is when you arrive at the weak sphere of influence of the planet you have targeted.
Yep, that makes perfect sense, and I like those points of reference because they're very definite, and there's no guesswork involved. Okay, so we're warping time forward. We still got about 40 days or something like that. About 40 days to go. And as we're getting closer, the DV is increasing a little bit, but we'll probably get all the way to the point where, well, we'll see. We still got a little bit farther to go.
We're so close that even if it gets to 15 meters per second, it's not worth making the burn because it will get us again aligned up with the center of Mars, and
Yeah.
we will not want that. So in this case, even if it gets to 10-15 meters per second, we are going to wait for 0.01 arrival, and I think we're pretty close.
That's a really good point. Even if you're being this close, you wouldn't want to do a mid-course correction that would align you with the center of Mars anyway. So just go ahead and wait for that 0.01. And yeah, we should be getting pretty close. And I'm going to try to really watch the time warp because yesterday I almost ran right into Mars. There we go. Okay, 0.01. And...
Okay. And we need 27 meters per second to get to the center of Mars. But of course we don't want to get there. We're going to get to a periapsis altitude in order to make a re-enter and then land. So for that we're going to use the map program.
Okay, so I'm assuming we're going to bring that up on the right side? Or does it not matter in this case?
We're not going to use, anyway, we're not going to use the target intercept program anymore.
Okay.
So you can hit menu over here, and if you have a specific base that you want to land at Mars, you can also select the landing base in the configuration.
Alright, yeah, let's do that, because we typically always want to land somewhere specifically, so let's go to configuration, go down to landing target, hit set, put in Olympus, and now we'll go back to the map program. And we probably need to reference Mars or something.
You can either do that, or you can target Mars in this view. Right now it would be best to reference Mars.
Okay, let's reference Mars.
But even if you targeted Mars, it would still be the same thing. Now you can say even without the correction, we're getting at minus 2,000 kilometers below the surface. And we are going in, from the inclination, we can tell that we are going in retrograde. And from this over here, we can tell that this is the ecliptic inclination and not the equatorial one. You can change that if you want by pressing target. And you can see here G, R, E, and L. The L is the equatorial inclination. I don't know why that is used, but you can press and you can see it targets the equator, and now it gives you your equatorial inclination. And we're going in the retrograde relative to the revolution of the planet, the direction of the spin.
Right.
Not that it really matters, but it's something that you can watch out for. You also know how many seconds away you are from periapsis and what your periapsis velocity is going to be. So the first thing that we want to do is hit the mode button so that we can also see how many degrees we need to align ourselves with the base. So right now with this correction, we're going to fix our periapsis altitude and we're going to align ourselves with the base. And by looking at the coordinates over here, we can also tell where we're going to arrive, where our re-entry is going to be on Mars. But we have so much speed that it doesn't really matter. Wherever we hit the re-entry, wherever we hit the atmosphere of Mars, we can make a skip and then go ahead and land at the base.
Right.
So, and we're so far outside, we're at 0.01, that we can do this with just a linear RCS from this far out.
Do we want to set up a delta V like a maneuver to see?
Not at all. Simply
Okay.
use, you can, of course, if you want, but you can simply use linear RCS and just look at the parameters over here.
Okay, so let's orient the vessel so that we have an orientation that makes sense to us. Yeah, let's
Press here on orbit MFD and orient prograde relative to Mars, but not use the autopilot because you're too far out. It's going to use the sun as the reference.
Yeah, it just makes it easier that way. You know that when you're translating forward, that you're translating forward relative to prograde as opposed to when your vessel's just pointing to some arbitrary spot in space. Then
and right now you know that if you are going to use left RCS and you are I think we are retrograde, so probably left RCS is going to push our orbit outward. I think we're going to have to see about that.
Yeah, so the number 3, which would be an outward type of movement, that would since we have a retrograde orbit, that would push the PEA further into the planet, I believe. It would basically be backwards. Let's find out. So I'm thinking 1 will actually extend us out closer to the surface, and I'm wrong.
Yeah, me too. I thought so too, but.
So with just a little bit of 3, and again, this is it would actually be kind of cool if we could have like a DV meter of some sort, just to sort of see what we're actually doing. How much
you can make a check. We can write down how much delta V you have now. With burn time calculator. And of course, we could have set this up as a maneuver in the delta velocity program, but it is really not worth the trouble. I mean, you see how little RCS, linear RCS you need to press, and you already have the altitude pretty much where we want it. For a Mars re-entry at this velocity, I usually go for about 20 kilometers if I'm flying the XR2. In this case, we're flying the Delta Glider, so you can probably land it right away.
Yeah.
Now, what you don't have is the angle.
Right.
If you want, you can try up and down RCS to see if that helps. It doesn't really matter because you have a lot of cross range on Mars, and you can use the atmosphere to get pretty much where you want.
Right. But just to show, just by using a little bit of RCS here, we're also bringing the angle down to near 0, and I'll use a little bit of inward translation to bring the PEA back down.
By using up and down RCS, you're changing your orbital plane, essentially. That's why the angle drops. And you can see that because the whole orbit MFT rotates to the right.
Yeah, so technically we might even want to rotate. Yeah, a little bit this way, and then we would have a more efficient up-down.
Translation.
Okay, well, that's basically exactly where we want to be, and this might slip a little bit, or is it
a little bit, about a kilometer or so, and perhaps a few tenths of a degree. It doesn't really matter. what you can do is you can check the coordinates and where you're going to arrive at Mars, because these are going to be the coordinates of this periapsis over here.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so Olympus is at 1274 north and 135 west. We're saying we're going to arrive 155 west, which is going to be a little bit past. That's going to probably be close to this line right here.
The line is at 150 exactly, so 5 degrees left of the line.
Yeah.
And at 2 south, pretty much exactly at the equator over here. So I'd say that we're going to arrive at a 7-kilometer altitude. Okay, we're going to hit the atmosphere at 60, 50, 40 kilometers, a little bit earlier than that. But basically, we're going to be at this altitude right about here.
Yeah. And how much will Mars rotate before we get there? Do we know? Well, periapsis is 435,000 seconds. That's still...
no, that's our position when we arrive at Mars, at this periapsis.
Oh, it actually has
already
taken into account.
It has already taken into account. The only thing that it's going to change is by the time we hit this point until we get to the base, that which is about a few minutes worth of rotation, that's all.
Yeah. And there is enough time to slow down.
I'm not really sure. I mean, Mars has a very thin atmosphere, so I'm not so sure about that. I usually give it about more than 30 degrees, but we are flying Delta Glider, so you can do a very aggressive re-entry.
I'm just trying to think when I do that HAL base to Olympus.
Even okay, so this time it just so happened that we arrived before the base, and we can tell, of course, that no, sorry, we're not arriving before the base. We're arriving after the base. Can you tell me how I know that?
Well, 135, 155. I cannot.
Equatorial inclination. We are retrograde. We're going down this way.
That's right.
We're going down this way, and we're actually hitting the periapsis after the base.
Right, exactly.
And this is a point that I want to make. Sometimes we are going to arrive after the base, but that's you get inside the atmosphere until you reach orbital speed, and then you skip around and you go for the base.
Right.
That's all.
So if we wanted to, we could maybe do a bit of translation to move the longitude farther to the east. I mean, not that we necessarily want to do that, but...
Well, basically what you would want, I mean, if you think about it, right now Mars is rotating this way, and we are coming in 141. So this would be 90 exactly. 141 would be something about something like this kind of inclination. I don't know if you can see the map. I'm going the mouse. I'm going to move it a little bit slower right now. So this would be the trajectory that we are going to have when we arrive. So basically, we want to arrive a little bit faster, so Mars doesn't have enough time to rotate this much.
Right.
But and you can do that by first pressing forward prograde to get there a little bit faster, and then adjust the rest of the directions of translation. But basically, for me, it really is not worth it. I mean, you can even hit re-enter at this point that we said that we re-enter, even with opposite direction, going past the base, and make a large turn and get to Mars. Make a large turn inside the atmosphere, which you're going to use for also to slow you down, and then get to the base.
Yeah, I think that's right.
From this point, it's whatever method everyone has. But if you wanted to arrive aligned with the base, this is what you would use. There are, of course, some other tricks that you can use right now, because we have used 10 meters total correction, something like that.
Yeah.
It was 11 meters when we made the first correction, and whatever we used now for translation, I don't think it was more than 2 or 3 meters per second. So that's the total correction we have done so far.
Yeah, and if we looked here at the propellant that we have, you can see, that we've used very little propellant overall. So that's just something to reference.
Another thing that you can do now is to try and use the base approach program of Interplanetary MFD if you want to get a slightly better prediction for the to set up a flight so that you arrive at the base and you are before the base when you hit the re-entry. And but that's going to cost in delta V, because right now we have a trajectory that is after the base, so we're going to have to make a correction for that. But basically for me it's not even worth using up the delta V, because you can use the atmosphere of Mars to get to the base that you want. If we were flying a capsule or something like that, then that would be something worth to do.
Yeah, and just for people just to know, when you get down to Mars, if you keep your altitude at around 40 kilometers and a little bit lower, don't get much above 40 kilometers. You'll have all the dynamic pressure that you need to be able to fly and do a complete U-turn. And in the Delta Glider, you can get down much lower than that. But sometimes you want to hold on to as much velocity as you can. So try to fly, at around 38, 39, 40 kilometers, and you can do a complete U-turn like Dimitri's talking about, and then you can go back to the base. So, but just out of curiosity, since we do have a couple more minutes left here, what if we wanted to use that Delta V program, or not Delta V, but base approach? What would we need to do for that?
Okay, open it up on the left as we are right now. Sorry, we have the map on the left, so perhaps it would be better to open it up on the right.
Okay.
And keep them up. Okay, go to the menu and select the base approach program.
Okay, we have base approach.
Now you can see that we are so far outside the Mars sphere of we are inside the weak sphere of influence. Mars is not the dominant body yet, so we have the reference as the Sun, and we need to change that to change our reference to Mars.
Okay, so reference Mars, got it.
Okay, and now you can see already that the prediction that without adjusting everything, the prediction is not very accurate. You can see on the map program where we are arriving. So we would want to go further inside Mars' sphere of influence in order to use the base approach program in a way that it would be efficient.
Okay, so bring up orbit MFD so we can keep an eye on the gravitational influence, or can we even see that in the base approach program?
Not really, but you can zoom out and see where the spacecraft is exactly right now, and press the sphere of influence, the SOI button, to see where you are relative to the sphere of influence of Mars.
Okay, so on the there we go. Let's go out even farther. So here's our spacecraft. Here's the sphere of influence. So now let's bring up Interplanetary on that side. Now we've got our base approach program, so let's go ahead and warp time forward, get closer to...
Basically, when you see the trajectory matching the one that is on the map program, that's when you have a relatively good prediction on the base approach.
And right now it's still showing that we're hitting the Mars on that side, but it's coming up as we get in closer. And we're almost into the strong sphere of influence.
And that's when it gets more accurate. So pretty much we can start adjusting the variables now.
Okay, back to real time, and let's just zoom in here. Okay.
Now, of course, this will cost in delta V.
Right.
Well, before we did not need any other corrections, and we got to our target basically, but we needed to make a skip re-entry. That's how I call it. It's like throwing a pebble in a lake, and you want it to lose all its speed on the first contact with the water, and then simply make one skip and land.
Yeah.
And that's basically what we will do. But we can try and set it up a little bit better with the base approach program. So we need to target the base, of course. So in this case, Olympus.
Yeah, and again, this might be helpful for people that aren't using winged vessels. Maybe you've got a capsule of some kind, or maybe you're using the Shuttle A or something. So
the next thing we need to set is the altitude of the re-entry.
Okay, let's go over to altitude, and probably want that, what, about 5 or 10?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 7.5K, split the difference.
Yeah. With the Raven Star, I would choose something around 15 kilometers. With the Delta Glider, obviously you can go lower.
Yeah.
Now the re-entry angle. You want to have a shallow re-entry angle. I mean, we are not coming back from the moon to Earth in this case. Now you asked me in a previous video about the re-entry angle. There is an exact definition in Wikipedia if you want to check. I don't remember it, but basically it is the angle that you are hitting the atmosphere. If you had 0 degrees re-entry angle, it means that you would be almost perfectly parallel with the atmosphere when you arrived for re-entry.
Okay.
But if you have a 90 degrees re-entry angle, it means that you are dropping vertically to the surface of the planet. So the 45 degrees means that you're coming in exactly diagonally, and you need a small re-entry angle in order to make a good re-entry, because you want to stay in the atmosphere for as long as possible.
Okay, actually, that's a very helpful explanation. I understand that much better now. Great.
So here we want to have something around 1.5, 2 degrees. I don't go for more. Of course, Mars is more forgiving than other planets, than Earth, because it has the atmosphere is not so dense. The next variable is the anticipation. How many degrees do you anticipate the re-entry to take you?
Yeah.
For Earth, I wouldn't go for more than 45 degrees, but Mars has a thin atmosphere, so it may take up to 60 degrees in order to make a re-entry.
Yeah, and again, the anticipation angle, that's how far how far in front of the base.
From the point you contact with the atmosphere up to the point that you arrive at the base.
Right.
And now the next thing that we need to check here is the direction of the flight, because you know that we are going retrograde, and if we start, the next variable would be this one, hint, and start adding seconds in order for IMFT to find the solution. But if you use prograde, it's going to find the prograde solution.
So we want to have that retrograde.
You can see that if you want, you can leave prograde, start adding seconds until it finds a solution. Obviously, it's going to be something like when you reach periapsis altitude, so it's not going to find an 8,000 second solution, because you are going to be at periapsis in 46,000 seconds. And it may not even do that, because sometimes you may have not used the correct variables over here. Perhaps it is impossible to get an angle of 60 degrees with these settings.
Okay, that's good to know. So sometimes you have to adjust other variables in order to even come up with a valid solution.
Yes, and sometimes it may not even find a solution in this program. So you can use another way to do it is by hitting the orbit insert button.
Okay.
Sorry, not the button. Select a different approach. Instead for re-entry, no, we were in the correct program, in the base approach program as we were before. I'm sorry, I did not phrase it correctly. Select approach 4 and change it. There are two different variables. There is the re-entry old. What this does is that it keeps your go back to the re-entry old so I can explain.
Yeah.
Basically, it keeps the altitude and the anticipation, but it changes the re-entry angle by itself in order to find the solution to get you to the base when you want. And you can say right now it's trying to find the solution for 0 seconds. So this is not a valid solution. But you can change the time until you get a better solution.
That would be the RET.
So, yeah. Basically, that's time to re-entry.
And if we move that closer to the periapsis,
you need to look at the basically. Previously, we said you want to keep 3 variables steady: the altitude, the re-entry angle, and the anticipation, and find the solution for the time. now it's keeping steady only the altitude and the anticipation, and it is changing the re-entry angle by itself in order to find the solution for this time. And you already know that you are going to have to be somewhere close to 40,000 or even more than that.
Yeah. So let's push that forward. Now, is re-entry old? Is it better in this case than the new?
Well, it's a different. It was actually implemented in an older version of IMFD, I think, and then the author kept it also in the newer versions because it was helpful. Sometimes you don't want exactly the solution that IMFD gives you for the re-entry angle you have chosen, or you may have chosen the wrong re-entry angle, and it will not find the solution like we did here. So you switch over to the old re-entry program, and you try a different way to find the solution. But from what I can see over here, it's not possible to find the solution for a good re-entry angle.
Okay.
You can go back and select the
Orbit insert.
orbit insert. Basically, is going to make a correction, but you can use these are connected right now, so you can use the plan if you change the page over here to see where it will actually get you by looking at the. So it's not that much of a difference relative to where we are now, and it is messing up our angle.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, the bottom line here is that the best way to do what we're trying to do here would just be to use the atmosphere and turn around in the atmosphere and come back. In this particular case, we just don't have a good solution for arriving at the base ahead of time, and we could have had a good solution if we had thought about it farther out. You know, when we were like at 0.01 or something, we could have adjusted our orbit at Mars so that it would be prograde instead of retrograde.
Yeah, you could have done something like that, but it again, you plan the whole trip from the beginning,
Right.
so you know what steps you need to. This we thought of the last minute, so right now it's difficult to find a solution. We can play around a little bit more by going to re-entry old and play a little bit more with the flight time in order to see if we will find the solution.
Okay, yeah, we got a couple minutes here. We can do that. I don't want to belabor the point too long because we are coming up close to 40 minutes on this video. So, so what would we adjust here though if we wanted to try that?
You adjust this variable over here and perhaps the anticipation to get a smaller anticipation for about 50 degrees. But let's see first. Let's start by setting this to 34,000.
Let's do set. Okay.
Okay, and keep adding. Okay, no, it's going the wrong way. The re-entry angle is way too big. You're coming. You can say that we are coming in diagonally, and so let's go the other way and see what kind of. That's about. Okay, let's keep going. Now you can see, of course, what kind of delta V you need for that.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even worth it when you can use the atmosphere to do that. But if we knew from the beginning, if we were flying a capsule from the beginning and we wanted to land it at a very precise location, then we would have used the whole approach from the beginning and first of all not arrive at Mars in a retrograde orbit, and make the base approach earlier and with more corrections as we arrive at Mars.
Yeah, well, this makes a great point to how important it is to plan everything in advance. Don't just jump into orbiter and point your vessel somewhere and then decide at the last minute what you want to do. Figure it out in advance. That way you can accomplish all these burns when you're still, thousands and thousands of miles out in space. But when you get right up on top of the planet, it's kind of hard to do adjustments, because you can see here, if we wanted to do any adjustments now, we're looking at delta V costs that are costing us more than the whole trip to Mars did. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, I think that pretty well explains everything here. Gives us the simple version of how to go from the Earth to Mars. And in another video, we'll take a look. We'll pick up back from the save point at Earth, and we'll kind of fiddle around with the things a little bit, and we'll show an even more sophisticated example of how to get to Mars.
Even more accurate than a 15 meter per second corrections that we used now.
Yeah, that's definitely very impressive. I think with TransX, the best I've ever been able to do for Mars was about 55 meters a second worth of mid-course correction.
Somewhere around 50. I mean, it doesn't get better than that.
Yeah. Okay, very good. All right, well, thank you once again for watching the video. Hit the like button down below. Check for the link in the description for Dimitri's YouTube channel. He has some cool videos there, so be sure to check that out as well. Leave a comment thanking Dimitri for helping us all out, and I will see you in the next video.